Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming here and joining me in my presentation. I'm very excited to present my research study, Women in Agricultural and Nutritional Decisions, a qualitative study in rural households in El Salvador. Well, my name is Rafael. I'm a PhD candidate at Ohio State, and I'm very fortunate to be working with two of my committee members in this research project, Dr. Mayor Rodriguez, that is my chair, and Dr. Jera Niewoehner-Green, that is also part of this study. Dr. Bush.
This doesn't like me. I'm not very good at this job.
Well, a little bit about this study. Women often engage in family and agricultural production. Unfortunately, agriculture continues to be a setting and a productive and social setting that is, perceived that is predominantly dominated by men. The feminization of agriculture is a phenomenon that we are experiencing all over the world for multiple reasons. In the Northern Triangle, where El Salvador is located, multiple social and economic forces are making men having to migrate to other countries or other regions within the same country. These issues are making women taking the leading role, but historically they have been working in agriculture. The issue is their labor is not recognized and is not getting the recognition by all the stakeholders within agriculture that it should be getting. Around 70% of the women in rural areas in the Northern Triangle, it's perceived that are dedicated exclusively or partially to the agricultural production. So we need to recognize this labor, and we need to put it in the place that it deserves in every effort we're doing. So this research project is one of those efforts. We want to understand what is that decision-making power they have within these issues in their households. Inequality between women and men is a consequence of the differential access and participation, of course in favor of men, this has been historically, in social, political, and economic structures. Low and middle income countries are way behind the developing countries in addressing these issues. So when we're thinking about these, the gender gaps compromise women's well-being and development. So for food and nutritional security at any level, studies suggest that we need to engage women not only as beneficiaries of the programs, but also as agents of change. Women are in charge, like Dr. Strong was saying, man is perceived as being at the head of household, but they are also making decisions and guiding those decisions. However, we need to make the effort and put in place resources and tools that are going to help them get and reach that goal. So the theoretical framework for this study, first we use, we're using and talking about patriarchy. This is a political and social structure that basically is telling us that men, it's dominating or has more privilege in any environment, in the social, economic, and decision-making spectrum in any level. Individual, community, society, labor. We have been dealing and trying to deconstruct us in this process. And I think the important part about this deconstruction process is that we need to understand that we are not where we want to get. We have a long way to go. And in low and middle income countries, there is a lot of work that we still need to do. And also we use the muted group theory to inform this study. The muted group theory is a sociological tool that helps you understand the relationship between a dominant and subdominant group. When a researcher is trying to understand the dynamic between a powerful and a marginalized group, the muted group theory helps you understand that dynamic if you don't have a clear framework. It has three tenets that are dominance, acceptability, and subordination. Dominance tells us a little bit about how the powerful group experience life differently, and they are the ones who have the privilege of giving their insights, putting their ideas, and guide the decision-making process. Acceptability, it's also connected mostly with the powerful group. They decide which behaviors, which language, which decisions are the appropriate one, and are the ones that are socially acceptable. And finally, we have subordination. And this is the process in which the marginalized group adopts everything that the powerful groups is promoting. So the marginalized group needs to start living their lives using everything proposed by the powerful group, but also trying to meet their needs. So we use this theory to inform our study that has as a purpose to explore women's participation in agricultural and food decision-making in rural households in El Salvador. And we have 3 research questions. How do women perceive their participation in the agricultural and food decision-making process at home? What are the limitations that women face to make agricultural and nutritious decisions? And how decision-making dynamics affect household food and nutritional security? For this study, we worked with an ethnography approach. We interviewed 9 women from Chalatenango, El Salvador. This is the state where I'm originally from. We use semi-structured interviews, and we use grounded theory methods to code and analyze the emerging topics or themes within the analysis of the interviews. So this is the fun part, the results. So about the decision making at home, participants perceive agricultural decisions as a man's responsibilities and nutritional decisions as a woman's responsibility. The disparity between that is enhancing food insecurity. Because if the man is deciding what they are going to produce, that is not connected with the food and nutritional preferences and needs that the family members have. One of the participants mentioned, my husband is deciding what we are going to cultivate. He tells me what he needs from me, and I help him in the field. After that, I have to decide what are we going to eat. So we can see that participants men are producing something, and participants needs to deal with the food and nutritional decisions based on those resources, but they don't have an insight in what they are going to produce. Women describe themselves as not having decision-making power over land, inputs, production, and profits from agricultural production, even when they are the owners of the land. The land we have, one of the participants mentioned, the land we have was an inheritance from my father. I let him, referring to her husband, decide what are we going to harvest every season. So we have seen a lot of research about land ownership and how we want to help farmers, but how is this really affecting the decision making? Are women really taking over the land they own and making decisions, or they are giving these rights to the men to make the decisions? The decision making, also the decision making at home, for household food and nutrition, women understand it's as their responsibility to ensure that there is enough food for each family member. One of the participants mentioned, I cook every meal for everyone. I must make sure we have food so we can all eat. If it is not enough, usually I am the one who must eat something else. We have seen that research suggests that women are the last one that eat, perceiving that the man is the one going out and working and having to eat, then the kids, and the last one is the woman. Not only reducing the portion, but also having to eat, or sometimes in the worst scenarios, not having enough food. According to the participants, they will make decisions related to agricultural production, taking the household food preference into considerations. In the women's participation, women affirm to consult their agricultural decisions looking for male approval. So they don't make the decisions by themselves. They always look to have their husband approval. Public and private interests rule out the participation of women in agriculture. One of the participants mentioned it, when they come to offer agricultural services, products, they always ask for my husband. If he's not there, they leave. So public and private organizations are ignoring the women participation in agriculture, and that's one of the issues we should be addressing. Thank you. Women also do not find the same support that their spouses receive when they decide to start an agricultural project. And at the household level, women perceive that historically it has been the man's responsibility to decide how agricultural resources and profits from the production are going to be managed and used. The final, this is a quote from one of the participants. He gives me money so I can buy what we need in the house. I must make that money enough to cover the expenses of the household. In addition, women transfer these ideas to new generation. Women mentioned it, I have taught my daughters how to work at home and in the fields. So they know they have the responsibility of taking care of the household, but they also have to go out and work in the field. The last emerging theme was implications of food security and nutrition. And basically, here we're going to see a lot of disparities among family agricultural production, food preference, and nutrition needs. Results from the separation of the roles in decision making between women and men. One of the participants said what we produce the most is corn. We hardly ever grow vegetables. What we like to eat the most are fruits and vegetables, but we can't afford to buy them. So those disparities are preventing people to get what they really want to eat or what they really need to eat, but they are producing something that is perceived to be the appropriate product to produce because they can sell that outside, but then they cannot afford other food within the household. Women usually seek to diversify the family diet, especially by incorporating animal proteins. However, the low participation in decision making is on the use of resources is limiting them on making those changes. One of the participants talked about how they would like to, have a chicken pen or maybe a pig, but their husband thinks that that's not appropriate, it's not worth it to have it. So that diversifying the nutritional part is very difficult for them. So, thinking in all of these results, I have a question for you. Raise your hand if you get the chance to eat breakfast this morning. I'm glad that it's almost everybody. Did you find something within everything we were very fortunate to have this morning that you like? So did you make the right decision, or did you were able to make the decision by your own of what do you want to eat? So that's what we want to achieve. That's what we're looking for. We want to give these women the possibility of not only making the decisions for them, but making the right decision for their household. Thinking about the needs that the kids have. The diet for a kid is not the same that a diet for a woman. Thank you. So some conclusions and recommendations. Women have shown the ability to make more efficient decisions in the use of resources with positive implications for food and nutritional security at the household level. The exclusion of women from decision-making in agricultural productions creates significant gaps between what is produced and the food needed to satisfy the needs of the family members. Future research is recommended to quantitatively analyze what are other social-demographic factors that could influence women's decision-making, as well as examine the association between women's decision-making and the indicators of food and nutritional security. For practitioners, women should be offered the same opportunities and access as men in any initiative aiming at agricultural production and food and nutritional security. Researchers should explore the consequences on women's health, well-being, and self-esteem derived from their participation in decision-making about food and nutritional security. And finally, extension and development programs must be intentional. We need to design them, deliver it, and evaluate them, considering all the women's needs and preferences, not only about food and nutrition, but also in the educational efforts we are disseminating. So that's my presentation, and I will take any questions you may have.
Wonderful. Anyone have a burning question? Just kick us off.
Yes.
Well, the first thing that came to mind is like, what do the men think about this? What do the men think about this? So your participants were the women farmers, and obviously we want to highlight these voices, but I'm always curious like how the men would respond to some of those questions. And like if we think about actually transformational change within those households, how do we target all the members?
Well, in this specific study, we haven't included men, and I think that will be a next step, and it will be interesting, and we haven't done. It will be interesting to see what men think. We have another study on also like a training on food security when we have men and women participating. Usually they have the perception that they are the head of household and they should be making the decisions. They recognize sometimes the lack of information to make those decisions, but they also agree on like the separation between like the nutritional and the agricultural decisions. So I think training will be needed not only for women, but we also need to, in that deconstruction process, we need to also provide training that will help men understand that sharing the roles and making women or open spaces for women is also important when we try to achieve food security and nutrition. Yes.
In one of the slides, the participant said she lets her husband choose. That was an interesting choice of words for me. Do you think that was a word used out of a position of power or just a translation?
Well, it's very interesting because all of, and that is something I did. This was conducted in Spanish, so I translated. But they it's coming from the power. They go for approval and they let the husband choose everything. Even when you ask a participant if they would like to be involved, the first thing they say is, if they would like to be involved in the research project, it's like, I need to double check if my husband will be here so I can go. Or I need to double check if I can go because I need to do this or work in the field. So everything comes from that power dynamic where they feel like, he is the head of household, so I need to get his approval to get engaged in these activities. So in the agricultural production, that's how it happens. If they are going to use any of their resources, they ask for approval before using it. Yes.
So you discussed a little bit how even if the women own the land, they didn't necessarily have the decisions, and then at the end having the nutritional decisions. So from the women's perspective as well as even as the researcher, what did they say they could do to potentially be the decision makers and involve the men so that they can have better nutritional access as well as the right crops to grow?
One of the main things that usually emerge is the lack of knowledge of what other foods they can incorporate, and they want to see how these can be sustainable. Like with the chicken pens or having a pig seems to be too much work to what they can benefit. So one of the elements that should be incorporated is how they can be more sustainable in those practices they are incorporating. When you think about the nutritional decisions specifically, it's connected with the idea that it's about cooking and about taking care of the family. And so that is the women's responsibility. So men wants to completely disconnect that, and that is connected with the patriarchy, structure that we have. Not everywhere, but in this context, it's pretty clear that a man shouldn't be in the kitchen, preparing the food, and that is when it's connected with the nutritional part. In the agricultural side, they basically, as a woman get married, even if she owns the resources, it's kind of like giving that to their husbands because they are the ones who are going to be in charge of the agricultural production.
One more question?
Yes.
First of all, wonderful study. I was wondering if you, ran into any barriers with maybe husbands that wouldn't let their wives participate? And then did you have any barriers as far as a woman's willingness to maybe speak in not as positive a light about their husband?
Well, there is always, this type of studies go through ethical review process, and we always offer the possibility of discontinue their participation at any moment and everything. We always have people that say, I will go to your interview. We hosted the interviews in a public space with an organization that was working with us, and people say, yeah, I will go, and they never came. In terms of they don't want it to talk about their husband, they are, there is always some of them willing to share more. There is some of them, of course, they don't want to share. We try to explain as much as we can how the process of confidentiality works and how we are gonna not reveal their names and everything. But yeah, the power dynamic is there, and some of them are more conservative in terms of what are they gonna share and the details they share. Some of them, are more willing to share how the dynamic is happening at the household level. But the participation in terms of women's studies is always very interesting. In rural studies, if you have men and women, you're always gonna have more male participants. I think it's about that roles that they play, and the woman needs to be at home taking care of the household. But 9 participants for a population of 500 is a very low population, but that was the highest number we achieved in terms of recruitment of participants. So that, I think that can speak volumes in terms of we went and we disseminate information in multiple ways to reach to them, but it's very, they still have definite challenges to engage in this type of projects. So that can inform a little bit about other trainings that will require more time. So we need to make sure we are finding the right way to do it.
I think it's also really important to remember the context of the study as well, because these findings are very specific to this particular area, whereas different studies that even Rafael and I have conducted in sub-Saharan Africa, the conversations with women could have been very different. And so it's important to keep the contextualization here, and to remember the power that that gives to understanding this particular phenomenon in this area.
All right, let's thank Rafael again.